Hello everyone and welcome to the first game that we'll be covering from the TePe Sigeman chess tournament. It is Nodirbek Abdusattorov with black versus Anton Korobov with white. And watching these two over the board, it's always a privilege. And it's a very strong tournament. We're gonna talk a little bit more about it in some other games. But yeah, it's an 8-player invitational. Nils Grandelius, the local representative, has already won the tournament 3 times. It also features last year's winner, Peter Svidler. Also, 3 youngsters are featured in the tournament: Nodirbek, Abdusattorov, Arjun Ergaisi, and Vincent Keimer, and also the always pleasantly unpleasant Anton Korobov. So it's a great game. Also reminds us how much time and how much chess clocks are a part of the modern chess. Because if you remember, if you've seen my Morphy saga, for example, some of Morphy's opponents who were not as strong players as these two gentlemen here found really strong defensive ideas because there just weren't any clocks. Sometimes Morphy's opponents would take up to 2 hours, and of course you know the gentleman that I'm referring to make a single move. Whereas okay, Morphy could also use that privilege for himself, but he pretty much blitzed out all of his moves. But yeah, you get the idea. Nowadays, mistakes are made, and they are very often made in time trouble, and this game is no different, as the critical error happens on move 39, so just before reaching time control. So let's check it out. Anton Korobov with white opens with pawn to c4. And Anton is a very strong player. He can pretty much, I mean, not pretty much, he can defeat everyone, and he has defeated everyone. But it's not an everyday occurrence that he faces someone who is over 100 points higher rated than him. As you can see, Nodirbek 2765. He broke into the world top 5. Yeah, I mean, absolutely incredible. He's been having an incredible run, and I don't see who will stop him from qualifying to the next candidate tournament. Arjun Ergaisi definitely included in that. So pawn to e5, knight to c3, and bishop to b4. The so-called Kramnik-Shirov counterattack of the English opening, or the reverse Sicilian. And now usually knight to d5 is played here to challenge the bishop right away. Also, if you don't mind doubling your pawns, you can play g3. If you don't prefer to double your pawns, you can play queen to c2. Just develop, fight for c4, fight for e4 to defend the knight. But here Anton prepared queen to b3. It is the 5th most popular continuation so far, and it hasn't yielded any great results for white in the past. So it's, I'm very interested to see what Anton prepared here. We have pawn to a5. You have to defend the bishop. So either you trade, which of course now you're not going to do once queen to b3 has been played. You can defend with a5, or you can just move the bishop anywhere, or even to a5, you know, much like you would in an Evans gambit, or you could defend it with knight to c6. Here, pawn to a5 by Nodirbek, and now g3, preparing to fianchetto the light square bishop. Knight f6, we have bishop to g2, and castles king side. We have knight f3, and now knight to c6. Here, with knight to f3, Anton is sort of trying to invite Nodirbek to advance the pawn to e4. And while this would give us, the viewers, I believe, the most pleasure, it's not maybe the most objective way to continue, especially against a very strong player. But I will show you just what could happen if e4 is played. Let's say you have to move the knight somewhere. And now, what if you play c5? It looks like it's a terrible idea, giving up all of these squares, dark squares to white. But let's say d5 is played. And now after c captures on d5, a4. Okay, what's happening here? The queen obviously has to move. You could also capture with the knight, but then you lose control over the d5 pawn. So, okay, let's move the queen. Let's not do anything silly. Now c4. And all of a sudden you have a game where black has control over d3. Black will take on d5 at some point, and it's... it's a very tricky position, especially if you go for something like knight captures on e4. Already white is just dead lost. For example, captures, and now queen to e8 nicely connects with the bishop and the knight. So it is maybe plausible in a lesser time format, like for Blitz and Rapid, maybe as a surprise, but not for Classical. But you are welcome to try it. So here, knight to c6, we have castles, and now there is a game. It was played in 1992 between Wolfgang Ullmann and Alexander Kalifman, where pawn to d6 was played, and Ullmann was able to win this game. But here we have rook to e8, and it is now as of move 7 that we have a completely new game. So okay, pawn to d3, controlling the e4 square, also preparing to develop the dark square bishop. knight to knight to d4, fighting for that central square. Also comes with an attack on the queen. So do you capture here? That is the question. And yes, you should. Knight captures, e captures, and now knight to e4, and knight captures on e4. And you know that, okay, if bishop captures, then it's nothing special. Okay, it can be played, probably c6 followed by d5 will be played. Black will fight for d5, and I mean, it's an equal position. But Anton wants more from this, and he plays d captures on e4. He's saying, okay, how are you to defend that d4 pawn in the future? And again, c5 does look to be a bit weird here. You can just trap the bishop with a3, so maybe not the best. Okay, you can trap it. a4 can be played to attack the queen, then the bishop moves, but it just looks too committal. So bishop back to c5, and now we have queen to d3. Again, by playing this d captures on e4 move, Anton prepares f4, and then he can play e5, f5, and attack the black king. So here you sort of stop that for the moment, as d3 would be very annoying, to say the least. So queen to d3, and now queen to e7. We have pawn to b3, and now pawn to d6, and finally bishop to b2. Anton is ready to collect on d4, and you can't really defend it. Well, not directly anyway. If you play something like queen to f6, already e3, and black is lost here. That's just it. So after this bishop to b2 move, Nodirbek says, all right, it's time for me to strike, not you, Mr. Anton, and plays pawn to f5. Okay, bishop captures on d4, we have f captures on e4, and now queen back to c3, putting pressure on that g7 pawn, and just pawn to b6. By Nodirbek. So, of course, you could argue that Anton's dark square bishop is much better than Nodirbek's dark square bishop, but it can always be traded off. And, for example, if the bishop moves and this diagonal opens up and Nodirbek puts this bishop on this diagonal, all of a sudden it could be Nodirbek with the mighty bishop pair. So rook a to d1 and bishop to b7. We have pawn to e3 and now pawn to h5. Again, like I said, you could trade here, but doesn't really do all that much. So pawn to h5, you want to have the option of pawn to h4 to open up the white king's position. Queen to b2. Now, Anton says, all right, I will move my queen, free up the c3 square for the bishop, so we lose this tension. And also, I gain the d file for my rook, adds more support to that d file. So pawn to h4 and the bishop back to c3. We have pawn to c6. Now here, instead of pawn to c6, bishop to b4, just going after this bishop, because for the moment it is much stronger than Nodirbek's bishop, is definitely an idea. And also maybe queen to d7, preparing pawn to h3 would be annoying. But okay, in the game c6 was played, Nodirbek really wants to get that pawn to d5. We have a3 and pawn to d5. But Anton strikes with pawn to b4. We have bishop to d6 and now c captures on d5, c captures and rook to d2, preparing to double up on the d file. Rook e to c8. You could also play rook a to c8, but Nodirbek prefers the rook on the a file, as if this opens up, he might have some rook lifts in the future, but also he has some very nasty tactics lined up, as you'll see. Rook e to c8, and now rook f to d1, and now a captures on b4. And now it would be a terrible mistake to play a captures on b4 here. It looks like something you want to do, but all of a sudden rook captures on c3 happens, and it's not great. Queen captures, bishop to b4 check, nicely connects. Once the queen moves, you're going to trade here. For example, captures, you defend the pawn, and it's a very weird position. This bishop is not great, but neither is this bishop, and while this bishop can be activated via the f1 square, so can this bishop via the a6 square, or you can shift the bishop here, maybe go for g4, h3. It would definitely be a game, but Nodirbek would be up a pawn, so he would be the one pushing for the win here. But Anton, not one to be tricked easily, plays bishop captures on b4. We have bishop captures, a captures, and now rook to c4. Very nicely done, goes after the b4 pawn, and rook to d4, nicely defending. Nodirbek doubles up on the c file, and Anton trades. Rook captures on c4, d captures on c4, and now queen to d4. Whenever in doubt, of course, you want to go for a centralizing move. This centralizes the queen very nicely, and we're only at move 30. 10 more moves need to be made to reach time control, and players have sufficient time on the clock, 20 minutes for both of them. But maybe a slight improvement to queen to d4 could have been bishop to h3. With the idea that it's just a free move, because this bishop needs to be activated at some point, and then you play queen to d4. So yeah, maybe something like that. But okay, queen to d4 right away, and now queen to e6, defending the b6 pawn, but also stopping that bishop to h3 move that we discussed. It's a very strong move. So pawn to b5, stopping Nodirbek from advancing the pawn to b5, and now pawn to c3. We have rook to c1, attacking the passed pawn, and now queen to f6. Nodirbek just offers a queen trade. Truly playing for the win would be probably c2. It looks like maybe you don't have anything, but after, let's say, bishop to f1, as by playing c2, you're really preparing moves like rook to c5 to go after the b5 pawn and to go just rook to d5 and go rook d1. With bishop here, you can't really move the rook away from the c file, as bishop to c4 would be very strong. So here, if you go rook to c5, let's say queen to d2, okay, queen to c8, the game continues, but a lot of pressure being thrown towards Anton's position here. But okay, after bishop c1, queen to f6, Nodirbek offers a queen trade, and Anton, of course, declines. He's controlling more space, so of course he does not want to trade. Queen f7 and queen back to d4. And now, while Nodirbek could repeat with queen to f6, Nodirbek wants to push for the win here, and as well he should. I mean, not because his position is better, but he is over 100 rating points higher rated. So if it's not losing, of course you need to prove your worth, and I mean your rating, and so he does. Rook to c5. Okay, very strong. But the problem is the queen on e6 in the position that we've discussed was defending the b6 pawn. Here the b6 pawn just isn't defended, and whether this is an oversight by Nodirbek, or he actually went really deep to make this work, I have no idea, but he does give up the b6 pawn. So Anton captures it. Queen d8 check, we have queen to f8, queen captures on b6, and now queen to e7. Okay, he's now down a pawn, but there's still the passed c pawn, and of course he will try to win the b pawn. So let's see what he had in mind. Queen to a5. Bishop to f1 is the way to push for the win here, but Anton also getting low on time. It's 13 minutes for Anton and 6 minutes for Nodirbek. We have queen to a5, and now comes queen to d7. Just preparing queen to d2 here. So queen to a2 with check, king to h8, and now bishop to f1, adding a defender to the b5 pawn. Yeah, now the only way to play is queen to d2. Point being that after queen to d2, if you move the queen, you have a terrible position. It's really passive, so you're going to have to trade here. And now just rook d1. Of course, you cannot take due to promotion. And here, let's say rook to c2, and black has enough compensation for the sacrificed pawn. But here, after bishop to f1, rook to c8 was played by Nodirbek. I have no idea why. But it was played, and now it is Anton's position that is winning. This is move 39, so both of them need to make one more move to reach time control. Feel free to pause the video and win the game for Anton while I give you a couple of seconds. It's not an easy one. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on spotting this one. I mean, if I ask you to find a forced mate in 12, it would probably be easier than spotting a slow move like this. But sometimes it's what needs to be done to take down a 27-65 player, and that is queen to b3. So congratulations to everyone who found this. Point is that now the pawn can be won by force. You're already up a pawn, so if you take down this one, then Nodirbek will have no counterplay. And you're probably wondering, okay, but how is it winning by force? Because we can always defend the pawn. And of course, Nodirbek does. He plays queen to d2. But okay, rook to c2 now attacks the queen. And the only square from where you can defend the c3 pawn is the e1 square. And now look what happens. Queen to f7. You attack the bishop. But okay, what's the problem? We can just move the bishop. Not a big deal. Okay, bishop to a8. And now comes the real move. Queen to d7. And this is what Anton saw when he played that queen to b3 move. All of these queen maneuvers. Now the rook is forced away from the defense of the pawn. Because if you try to keep the rook on the c file to defend the pawn, of course, just a nice queen check will pick up the bishop. That's only one of your problems. So rook to f8 was played. Nodirbek puts pressure on the f2 pawn, but not really relevant as the rook defends the f2 pawn. So queen to c7 now piles up on the c3 pawn, and queen to d1. attacking the rook, but now just queen captures on c3. And now Nodirbek is up 2 pawns. His position is completely winning. Sorry, Anton is winning. Position is completely winning. It's only a matter of will he be able to win it. And time control has been reached. Of course, now they have additional time on the clock. Rook to d8 was played. Now comes rook to c1, chasing the queen away. Queen to f3, and now queen to b2, defending the f2 pawn and preparing to advance the past b pawn to victory. And the problem is Nodirbek's light square bishop is well, it can move a little bit, but it's really worse than a pawn. There's no way to activate it. h3 doesn't do anything because the bishop is guarding g2. If you capture, again, not all that great. Let's say we'll rook d6, try to checkmate the white king. Not relevant because just bishop g2 and that's it. This bishop is a pawn. So here, queen to b2, bishop to d5. Nodirbek still finds a trick, as of course he will, a strong player as such as him. b6 and now rook to f8. And here the idea is, of course, that if b7, which of course can easily be rushed, you will take. And once queen captures, the f2 pawn is no longer defended. Something like h captures or take right away, doesn't really matter. It will be a draw. Let's say bishop g2, g captures on f2 checking, h1 queen captures on e3, and with 2 connected passed pawns, well, or rather soon to be connected passed pawns, you have definitely compensation for the extra piece. But after rook to f8, Anton just played rook to c7, and he was in this position on move 49 that Nodirbek Abdusattorov resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. Problem is, not only is f2 now defended forever, the checkmate is also being threatened on g7. And not a lot of ways you can avoid this. For example, you can play a rook to f6, but now b7, queen is coming. Let's say you give up the bishop, doesn't really matter because now the rook captures, the queen will keep defending the f2 pawn. And if something like h captures, and rook to h6, of course you see that it cannot be played because queen captures on g7 will be checkmate. So yeah, very, very interesting position, but Anton Korobov takes down Nodirbek Abdusattorov. Nodirbek could have forced a draw in that position that we've discussed, but yeah, he is the tournament favorite, and well, he alongside Arjun Erigaisi, they are tournament favorites rating-wise. So of course he has to push for the win here. But Anton takes him down, and Anton also won his second round game. I believe he faced Marc-Andrea Maurizi, world junior champion, also won a very nice game. So yeah, as usual, we are expecting great things from Anton Korobov regardless of the opposition. So we'll see how the tournament continues. If you have any other favorites from the event, also use #suggestion, and I will gladly go over them. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Bit of a different scenery, than when we enjoyed those engine games. But yeah, mistakes will be made and they will be severely punished. So yeah, hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Marshall Byrne, Rudiger Osterman, Bjorn Bartel, Michael Hildebrand, and Steve Schwartz for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.